In 1937, amid the financial collapse of the world's greatest economic power, when millions were living in misery and hope seemed like a luxury item, one man dared to write about wealth. But not just any wealth. Napoleon Hill spoke of a kind of wealth that began long before a single coin ever touched your pocket. He spoke of an invisible transformation, of a secret that had traveled through the centuries, hidden within the actions of the most influential men in history. When Think and Grow Rich was published, it wasn't received as a self-help book. It was received as a manifesto, a kind of unwritten code that, according to the author himself, had been revealed to him by Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate who believed true gold wasn't in the ore, but in the disciplined, iron-willed mind of a man with purpose. Yet what few know, and even fewer understand, is that the true message of the book didn't survive the popularity sparked by its title. Think and Grow Rich became synonymous with cheap positive thinking, with motivational quotes slapped on refrigerator doors, with gurus selling hope in colorful bottles and seminars that ended in applause but delivered no real change. The cruel irony is that Hill wrote one of the deepest treatises on how the human mind works, on inner responsibility, on the engineering of willpower. And most people interpreted it as nothing more than an invitation to daydream. And that misunderstanding came at a heavy cost. It cost generations who believed that wishing was enough, people who confused thinking with fantasizing, who confused faith with passivity, who waited for life to change without ever changing themselves. The root of that mistake lies, paradoxically, in the simplicity of the words Hill chose. Think. A verb so common, so mundane, it seems to carry no weight. But Hill didn't use it in its trivial sense. Thinking to him was sculpting reality with the chisel of the mind. It meant training your thoughts until they became a concrete directional force, programmed to produce effective action. And to grow rich in Hill's world wasn't just about accumulating goods. It was about expansion, about growth, about creation, about increasing your power to create impact. The title, therefore, was interpreted literally by millions, but never understood in its symbolic depth. Because true thinking hurts. It requires effort. It requires self-confrontation. And true wealth demands discipline, risk, focus, failure, and unyielding faith. The path is hard, and that doesn't sell as well as fast promises. The historical context also played a role in this distortion. In the 1940s and 50s, as consumer culture boomed in the United States, the book was hijacked by a mentality of immediacy, where success became measured in numbers, not in values. Hill became a symbol of motivation, but his ideas were diluted in the shallow waters of reckless optimism. Publishers, radio hosts, public speakers, they all wanted the shine of the word rich, but few were interested in the hidden weight of the word think. And so, little by little, the book became a distorted mirror of itself. Critics dismissed it as shallow self-help. The public idolized it for the wrong reasons. And the truth? The truth was buried beneath tons of misinterpretation. But it's still there, intact, waiting to be rediscovered. Hill never wanted you to just wish. He wanted you to awaken, to take full ownership of your destiny, to understand that the human mind is a power plant, but also a prison, depending on how it's used. He spoke of habits, of mental discipline, of subconscious reprogramming, of rational faith, of absolute focus. He spoke of the human being as a moldable force, not a magical one. He proposed a path, not a formula, a process, not a miracle. And once you grasp this, you begin to realize that Think and Grow Rich isn't a catchy title. It's a philosophical provocation, a call to war against weak thinking, against emotional cowardice, against voluntary mediocrity. And maybe that's exactly why it was misunderstood, because truth, as always, demands more from us than illusion. It doesn't flatter the ego. It doesn't come with easy promises. It demands that you die to who you are now and be reborn into who you need to become. Napoleon Hill knew this. That's why he wrote as if sculpting a mental cathedral. Every word, every principle, every metaphor, all of it was designed to create inner shock, not comfort, to generate movement, not stagnation. And our greatest mistake was not hearing the silence between the lines, not perceiving the scream that echoed behind every chapter. You alone are responsible for your rise. That truth still stings because it demands what almost no one is willing to give, unconditional responsibility. And now that you know this, the question demands an answer. What exactly have you been calling thinking? And what have you done with your thoughts? There is a moment in Think and Grow Rich that many people read, underline, quote, but almost no one truly understands. It's when Napoleon Hill talks about burning desire. These two seemingly simple words carry the weight of an entire universe of transformation. But what does it really mean to desire something with burning intensity? Is it merely wanting it a lot, yearning passionately, or perhaps visualizing it repeatedly until the universe conspires? Hill's answer is as direct as it is brutal. Burning desire is living as if what you want is already determined, and the only choice left is to reach it or die trying. There's no room for half-hearted wishes in this concept, no place for lukewarm dreams, for it would be nice if, or maybe someday. The kind of desire Hill describes is almost a living entity within a person, a sacred obsession that consumes, directs, and molds every thought, every choice, every reaction. To Hill, true desire is not emotional, it's structural. It doesn't waver with your mood, it doesn't vanish in the face of obstacles, it doesn't bargain with excuses. It becomes the backbone of existence, and here lies the vast abyss between wanting and burning desire. The first waits, the second builds. The first asks for permission, the second acts as if there's no alternative. And when Hill illustrates this kind of desire with stories of people like Thomas Edison, who failed over 1,000 times while trying to invent the light bulb, or Henry Ford, who dismissed engineers' doubts and insisted on the V8 engine, he's not just sharing tales of persistence. He's revealing the mental blueprint of people who eliminated Plan B, who turned desire into identity. Edison didn't want to invent the light bulb. He was the light bulb before it existed. Ford didn't just desire to create the affordable car. He already saw streets filled with cars long before the metal was ever cast. That's the level of desire Hill considered necessary, the kind that becomes flesh, blood, and unshakable conviction. But we live in an era where wanting has become diluted. We desire like someone flipping through a catalogue of possibilities. Today, we want freedom. Tomorrow, safety. Today, we want to be entrepreneurs. Tomorrow, we seek stability. Today, we dream big. Tomorrow, we complain about being tired. And in this emotional seesaw, we mistake desire for fleeting emotion. Hill would call that mental suicide, because true desire doesn't rely on excitement, it relies on decision. And once the decision is made, there is no turning back, no matter how long it takes, no matter how many doors close, no matter how many times the world says no. When the desire is burning, the yes becomes inevitable, even if it takes decades. So how do you cultivate that kind of desire? Hill offers a path: absolute clarity of purpose. Burning desire doesn't appear by chance. It's fed daily with vivid visualization, with powerful affirmations, with a plan of action even when everything feels uncertain. To desire with burning intensity is to wake up already committed to the impossible. It's talking to yourself as if you're already living the future you want. It's acting as if failure doesn't exist as a real option. Hill knew the brain doesn't distinguish between imagination and reality when both are fed the same emotion and repetition. That's why he said it was possible to set the mind on fire with an idea until it becomes inevitable. And here comes the painful paradox. Most people say they want to grow rich, but they're afraid of the price, afraid of the responsibility, afraid of the time it will take, afraid to give up distractions, afraid to live for a single focus, afraid of being judged for being obsessed. But Hill was clear. Without focused obsession, there is no extraordinary achievement. Burning desire demands emotional isolation, resistance to criticism, and rejection of comfort. It's a lonely path, but one lit by an intimate certainty the world has yet to see. And if you're hearing this now, maybe it's time to face the question without filters. Do you want, or have you already decided? Because if you're still negotiating with yourself, if you still have to convince yourself every day, if you're still waiting for an external sign, then the desire isn't burning, it's just lukewarm. And lukewarm desire never moves mountains. At best, it warms tea. Hill's secret was never just about thinking and getting rich. It was about thinking with such focus and intention that desire transforms into destiny. And when that happens, the universe may resist. But time always bows to a determined mind. When we hear the phrase, the power of thought, it's common for vague images of positivity and mysticism to surface in the mind. Many associate it with colorful visualizations, affirmations spoken into a mirror, or even the idea that merely believing is enough for the universe to deliver what we desire. But Napoleon Hill never defended a magical view of the mind. Quite the opposite. His understanding of the subconscious was deep, technical, and brutally practical. Hill saw the subconscious as fertile soil where every thought planted with emotion and repetition becomes a seed of tangible reality. He viewed this mental field as a dark, continuous programming system that operates 24 hours a day, absorbing instructions, beliefs, and images that later manifest as behavior, decisions, and destiny. The most common mistake of people who read Think and Grow Rich superficially is treating the subconscious as a vault where you toss in a wish and wait for a return. But what Hill taught was infinitely more powerful and more demanding. He saw the subconscious mind as an emotional operating system, highly sensitive to repetition and the emotional charge behind each thought. The subconscious doesn't judge, filter, or argue. It simply accepts. And that acceptance can lead to glory or ruin, depending on what you feed into it. Hill warned, you are always programming your mind. The only question is, with what? And that's where the idea of magic falls apart, because there's nothing mystical here. There is science, there is neuroplasticity. Today, decades after Hill, we know that the brain can form new neural connections based on repetition, vivid imagination, and associated emotion. We know that patterns of thought become mental habits, and those habits shape decisions, reactions, even the body. Hill intuited all of this long before modern neuroscience. When he said that faith is born from repeated emotional affirmations, he was, in practice, teaching us how to hack the human brain. Whoa. He was offering a key, but few knew how to turn it correctly. To Hill, the subconscious mind was the true battlefield, because that's where the war is waged between what you consciously want and what you unconsciously believe. It's no use saying, I want to prosper, if your subconscious is full of emotional records of failure, fear, scarcity, or guilt. It's no use declaring that you deserve more if the inner voice dwelling deep in your mind keeps whispering that you're not enough. Hill taught us that the subconscious can be your greatest ally or your cruelest saboteur, and that depends entirely on the kind of message you repeat to yourself daily, often without even realizing it. That's why he emphasized autosuggestion, affirmations, and mental imagery, not as esoteric rituals, but as tools of intentional reprogramming. He wanted you to take control over what enters your mind automatically. To decide, with clarity and repetition, what you want to imprint on your subconscious. Because once something is imprinted there, it begins to operate silently, like invisible software running every move. Hill understood that the subconscious does not respond to surface-level desire. It responds to the depth of your emotion. It reacts to what you repeat with conviction, not what you occasionally think when you feel inspired. And here lies the most neglected truth by those who merely like the concept. Subconscious programming requires radical emotional discipline. It's not enough to repeat cliches. You must feel what you say. You must visualize it vividly. You must involve the body, the senses, the emotion, the time. You must repeat with hunger, with intention, with truth. Because the subconscious registers more intensely what's loaded with pain, desire, ecstasy, or terror. And if you don't use this consciously, it will keep operating with the old records. Your traumas, your humiliations, your failures, your fears, your judgments that you never consciously rewrote. Hill's invitation, therefore, is almost surgical. Be the programmer of your own mind, or accept the programs the world imposed on you. It's that simple, and it's right here that most people fail, because reprogramming the subconscious doesn't yield instant results. It's like planting an entire field. It requires consistency, patience, and a faith grounded in conviction, not illusion. Hill knew that the subconscious mind, when properly activated, becomes a silent magnet, not because the universe conspires, but because your focus shifts, your choices change, your perception transforms, and that changes everything. So if today your life doesn't reflect your deepest desires, maybe the issue isn't what you want, but what you're allowing your mind to keep repeating. Maybe it's the absence of a clear code, of intentional reprogramming, of firm, daily internal vigilance. Napoleon Hill didn't promise miracles. He promised results to those bold enough to think like an engineer of the mind. The question remains, are you ready to take that job, or will you continue outsourcing your programming to the patterns that sabotage you? If there is one concept in Think and Grow Rich that has been systematically underestimated, ridiculed, or trivialized, it is auto-suggestion. Many skim through that chapter as if glancing at a motivational poster on the wall, without realizing that hidden beneath simple words lies one of the most powerful pillars of mental control that Hill ever revealed. Autosuggestion is not about repeating phrases in front of the mirror with a forced smile, nor about faking optimism while the mind is bleeding inside. It is, in fact, a system of deliberate neural encoding. It is the intentional and repetitive process of embedding precise instructions into the subconscious about who you want to become, what you wish to achieve, and how you intend to respond to life. Hill treated autosuggestion as a tool of inner engineering, a bridge between the conscious world, where you think and desire, and the subconscious world, where everything is converted into habits, emotions, and automatic decisions. The human mind, to Hill, functions like an operating system, and autosuggestion is the programming language. By repeating specific phrases with emotional intensity, you are literally writing new lines of code into your inner system. And the stronger the associated emotion, the faster that code takes root. Autosuggestion, therefore, is not a superficial ritual. It is a practice of existential rewriting. And anyone who doesn't understand this is missing the chance to redesign their own biography. But why do so few use it correctly? Because it requires a level of responsibility and consistency that most avoid. It's not enough to repeat words. You must believe them as if they were already real. You must affirm with clarity, with intention, with mental imagery and physical sensation. You must visualize not only the result, but the path, the challenges, the emotions that will come with it. Hill said that words by themselves are just empty vehicles. It's the emotion that turns them into fuel, and what you feel while you affirm is what truly gets recorded in the deep mind. That's why saying "I am prosperous" while feeling fear, doubt, or guilt won't work, because the subconscious doesn't absorb the phrase. It absorbs the dominant feeling behind it. Another common mistake is lack of structure. Auto-suggestion without clarity is like throwing stones in the dark, hoping to hit a target. Hill taught that affirmations must be specific, measurable, time-bound, and tied to a clear action plan. No more "I want to be happy" or "I want to be rich." He suggested affirmations like, by specific date, I will have in my possession specific amount of money, which will come to me honestly through defined activity, in exchange for clear service or value. This formula is not just elegant, it's functional. It gives structure to the desire, sets a deadline, aligns effort, and connects it all with emotion, visualization, and repetition. It's a complete code, practically a mental contract signed daily. Hill also warned the timing of repetition matters. The subconscious is most receptive during the first minutes after waking and the last moments before sleep. In that transitional state between full consciousness and the dreaming mind, suggestions penetrate more easily. That's why those who master auto-suggestion often develop morning and nighttime rituals where they repeat their goals with absolute focus, eyes closed, conscious breathing, intense visualization. It's not superstition, it's applied neuroscience. In those moments, the brain enters an alpha wave state, more open to new ideas and less critical. And that's when the mental code enters without resistance. And the results? They are exponential. When autosuggestion is applied with discipline, it begins to reshape not only your thoughts, but your perception of reality. You start noticing opportunities where there was once noise. You begin to behave like someone who already is who they want to become. Decisions shift, the environment responds, and slowly the outer world begins to reflect what's already printed in your mind. Hill saw this as the silent engine of success. It's not instant, it's not magical, but it's inevitable as long as you don't stop. So the question that echoes is brutal. What have you been suggesting to yourself every day without realizing it? Because even without using scripted phrases, you are auto-suggesting constantly. Every time you say, I can't, it's hard, I'm not good enough, things never work out for me, you are encoding that into your inner system. And the subconscious, obedient like an ancient servant, will find a way to make that real. Hill warned us, either you master auto-suggestion or you will be mastered by it. Now is the time to choose your words as seriously as you would choose the bricks of a house you plan to live in forever, because that's exactly what you're building, a mental dwelling where your future will live. Utul. What are you putting inside? When Napoleon Hill speaks of faith in Think and Grow Rich, many readers automatically associate the word with something religious, mystical, tied to dogmas or spiritual beliefs. And in doing so, they miss the heart of what may be the most powerful and revolutionary mechanism in the entire book. Hill wasn't referring to faith as blind submission to higher powers. He was talking about something infinitely more practical, more human, and more trainable. Faith as emotional conviction built strategically, consciously, and programmably. In other words, faith as a system, as a force for action, as rational certainty, as psychological fuel of the highest performance. For Hill, faith was the mental state that most influenced the subconscious, and therefore the reality one lives. But this kind of faith, according to him, does not appear by chance. It is created, cultivated, and fed through discipline. Faith is the direct result of the emotional repetition of ideas. It is like an invisible sculpture crafted from affirmations, experiences, visualizations, and daily decisions. And that's why, in his view, anyone can develop faith, even those who don't believe in anything at first. Hill's faith is constructive because it emerges from consistent mental practice. It is not naive hope or wishful confidence. It is the deliberate installation of a certainty into the nervous system that shapes behavior, eliminates doubt, and generates results. This conception of faith requires no temples, but it does require time. It does not call for prayers, but for affirmations. It demands no external devotion, but an internal intensity. Hill believed that the human being, by repeating ideas with enough emotional force, created a kind of neural path that the brain begins to follow automatically. And once the mind starts operating on that new path, everything changes. How the world is perceived, the opportunities one sees, the risks one takes, the resistance to criticism, the resilience after failure. Faith, in this context, is an active mental armor that protects the individual from the contagion of external failure. And more than that, according to Hill, faith is what transforms desire into action, because merely wanting something is not enough. You must believe it's possible. You must feel it's inevitable. You must act as someone who already possesses it, even when everything around says otherwise. Faith is what prevents someone from quitting when results don't show up. It is what fuels silent persistence through the nights. It is what sustains focus when no one else believes. Hill knew that without faith, desire becomes anxiety. Without faith, discipline becomes suffering. Without faith, the mind succumbs to doubt. And doubt, as he said, is the greatest saboteur of achievement. But where does this practical faith come from? Hill pointed to three main sources: emotional autosuggestion, a strengthening environment, and growing experiential evidence. He taught that repeating powerful affirmations in receptive mental states just after waking, before sleep, during introspective moments, builds faith by construction. Repetition plus emotion is conviction. He also emphasized environment. Surrounding yourself with people who reinforce your beliefs rather than drain them is essential. Faith dies in the company of chronic skeptics. And finally, he reminded us that every small, real result, every micro-victory along the path, strengthens faith like a muscle. That's why action is essential. Faith that doesn't act dies. Faith that is not tested weakens. Faith that is not applied disappears. And here comes a brutal revelation. Most people already have faith, but in a destructive direction. Faith that things won't work out. Faith that it will be hard. Faith that they always fail. Faith that the world is cruel. Faith that they don't deserve. All of this, when repeated with emotion and consistency, also becomes certainty. It also programs the subconscious. It also shapes reality. The mind does not distinguish between positive and negative faith. It simply obeys what has been most frequently and intensely installed. That's why the question is not whether you have faith. The real question is, what are you believing in every single day without realizing it? Hill understood that changing your life is, above all, changing the dominant faith in your heart and mind. And that change begins with intentional reprogramming. He taught us to cultivate faith the way a gardener cares for a rare plant, daily, with attention, with care, with words, with protection, and above all, with action. Because for faith to bloom, it must see its fruits. It must be challenged, tested, applied. This kind of faith cannot be bought. It can't be inherited. It can't be outsourced. It is built in silence, in the dark, in the daily effort no one sees. And when it finally blooms, it moves mountains that once seemed immovable. Aunties. At the heart of Napoleon Hill's ideas lies a concept that, despite being frequently cited by modern entrepreneurs and leaders, remains deeply misunderstood. The mastermind, as described by Hill, is not just a gathering of brilliant minds exchanging business cards or career tips. It's not a networking group or a mutual support committee. It is something much deeper, more subtle, and more powerful. For Hill, the true mastermind is the creation of a collective mental field, a kind of invisible fusion between minds aligned by a common purpose, producing a result, exponentially greater than the sum of its parts. It's as if a new consciousness is born from the strategic union of people with focus, faith, and vibrational alignment. To grasp this, one must go beyond purely rational logic. Hill saw the human being not only as a biological organism, but as a transmitter and receiver of mental energy. He believed that just like a radio tunes into frequencies, human minds can align and create resonance. And when two or more people are in sync, with clearly defined goals, mutual respect, and a genuine spirit of contribution, they tap into a kind of intelligence that none of them possesses alone. This intelligence, according to Hill, is like an emergent entity, a new mental being born from the fusion of consciousnesses, operating with expanded wisdom, amplified creativity, and multiplied power. This concept is not just poetic, it's functional. Think of the great duos, trios, or groups that changed the world: Da Vinci and his patrons, Jobs and Wozniak, Lennon and McCartney, Edison and his assistants. These weren't just colleagues. They formed masterminds, mental fields of co-creation. Why does this happen? Because when humans connect emotionally and intellectually with one another, they begin accessing insights that would never arise in isolation. Thought accelerates, perspectives widen, horizons expand. The mind enters a state of flow, driven by an electric current generated through united purpose. But there is one critical condition: vibrational alignment. The mastermind does not operate in environments filled with selfish competition, disguised vanity, or hidden agendas. Hill was clear. The group only generates this higher energetic field when there is trust, loyalty, noble intent, and a sincere desire for collective growth. The ego must be left at the door, because the collective mental field detects frequency distortion, and when noise appears in the form of envy, fear, control, or pride, the field collapses. The mastermind is sensitive. It is alive, it is organic, and it must be cultivated like a delicate flame that can either illuminate or be extinguished in an instant. And more. Hill believed this mental energy field could even be accessed with people who are no longer alive. He described in his own creative process the practice of imagining meetings with great historical figures, Lincoln, Edison, Darwin, Carnegie, as if they were sitting at an invisible table before him. And in this meditative practice, he would ask questions, receive mental answers, and write down the insights. Many called it madness, but today, with the progress of psychology, neuroscience, and even quantum physics, we begin to understand that the human brain is capable of simulating interactions with complex mental models, and that this simulation can, in fact, generate original solutions and creative breakthroughs. So, the mastermind is not limited to the physical. It is a mental technology, an amplification portal, a shared wisdom center. It can happen in a deep conversation between two friends, in a small group with a shared mission, or even within yourself as you interact with your internal references. But it only activates when there is clear purpose, sincere commitment, and emotional openness. It is the opposite of superficiality, the opposite of rush, the opposite of transactional thinking. The true mastermind is spiritual, in the sense of profound connection, not religion. And why does this matter so much? Because true success is not built in isolation, because ideas need mirrors, because vision needs expansion, and because no human being can fully see all corners of their own mind. We need others to see what we cannot, to correct what we overlook, to strengthen what we already have, and to provoke what has yet to awaken. Hill gave us a key that goes far beyond modern individualism. He said, "No mind is complete by itself. It is in union that genius is awakened." The question that remains is, who are you building your mental energy field with? Do your conversations expand or shrink your potential? Are you surrounded by minds that challenge you or ones that comfort you too much? Are you cultivating a mastermind or drowning in a sea of social distractions? If the answer is, I don't know, maybe it's time to rebuild your circle. Because as Hill said, what you need most is not more solitary effort, but more alignment with the right minds. Napoleon Hill wrote dozens of chapters about success, purpose, autosuggestion, faith and wealth, but there is a silent enemy he denounced even more vehemently than poverty or failure: fear. Not fear as a momentary alert, but fear as a chronic condition of the mind, as an invisible poison that paralyzes the human spirit before the first step is even taken. Hill knew that when fear goes unidentified and unchallenged, it becomes an invisible cell, a mental prison with bars of doubt, concrete made of insecurity, and a lock forged from resignation. Human beings are born free, but it is fear that convinces them to live in chains, to doubt themselves, to settle for less, to avoid daring. Hill didn't just identify fear as the enemy. He catalogued the 6 primary fears that, according to him, have enslaved humanity since the dawn of time: the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of illness, the fear of losing love, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. These 6 psychological phantoms, Hill said, silently shape our decisions, our reactions, our behaviors, and even our identities. They are mental inheritances we absorb from early on, through observation, trauma, culture, and they begin to function as hidden commands influencing our choices. The great tragedy is that almost no one recognizes them consciously. People simply live under their rule, believing they are being realistic, cautious, or mature. The first and most common is the fear of poverty. How many people remain in unhappy jobs, empty relationships, toxic environments, simply out of fear of losing financial stability? How many dreams are buried alive because someone is afraid they won't be secure? Hill said poverty is just an external condition, but the fear of it is an internal prison. He taught that true security is born from self-confidence, from the ability to create, to serve, to transform. Relying on a fixed salary and fearing risk, he said, is a modern form of mental slavery. But the fear of poverty teaches the opposite: to obey, to bow your head, to settle for the bare minimum. Then comes the fear of criticism, the most subtle, the most insidious. It's this fear that causes so many to hide their talents, their ideas, their truth. The fear of looking ridiculous, of being judged, of failing publicly. Hill called it the killer of genius. Because the fear of criticism drives people to live to please others, and no one fulfills their destiny by trying to avoid judgment. He knew that criticism is inevitable for those who dare, but fear of it is optional. And overcoming that fear doesn't mean not caring. It means caring more about your mission than about others' opinions. The fear of illness and the fear of death are twin brothers. They operate deep in the mind like shadowy reminders of our vulnerability. Hill knew that when unchecked, these fears create emotional hypochondria, sabotage enthusiasm, and drain life force. He taught that obsession with perfect health can become a prison, that living in constant fear of getting sick is already a form of illness, and that death, when accepted as part of the journey, stops being an enemy and becomes an advisor. A mind that fears death fears living, and a mind that fears living builds nothing great. The fear of losing love and the fear of old age are equally paralyzing. The first traps us in emotional dependency, attachment, submission disguised as romance. How many sacrifice their dreams just to keep someone around? How many abandon their essence for fear of being alone? Hill said, love is not a cage. If it binds, it is not love. The fear of aging, meanwhile, is the terror of becoming useless, irrelevant, invisible. But Hill saw old age as the phase of true wisdom. If the mind remains active, he didn't fear time passing. He only feared someone stopping their growth long before physical death arrives. And how do you conquer these fears? Hill was clear. with awareness, gradual exposure, and cultivated faith. First, you must name the fear, bring it into the light, write it down, look it in the eye. Then, face it in small doses, speak in public even if your voice shakes. Invest even amid uncertainty. End what's hurting even with a heavy heart. Move to a new city even without all the answers. Exposure dissolves fear. And finally, you must nourish the opposite faith. Replace "what if it goes wrong" with "what if it goes right." Replace "I can't" with "I can't keep denying myself." Replace "I'm not ready" with "I'll never be, and still I go." Hill left us a mental legacy, and within it, an urgent warning. Fear does not die on its own. It must be killed. And it only dies when you challenge it in the open field. The problem is that most people try to defeat fear without moving. They wait for courage to arrive. But courage is the child of action, and freedom, according to Hill, is the result of having won the internal war that paralyzes millions every day. The final question is simple, but devastating. How many of your life decisions are still being made out of fear, not choice? Napoleon Hill said that desiring something with intensity was the first step toward any extraordinary achievement. But what few people grasp, even after reading and rereading Think and Grow Rich, is that this desire, no matter how burning, is absolutely worthless without discipline. Desire is the spark, discipline is the fuel, desire is the vision, discipline is the path. And that is exactly why so many people, even with powerful dreams and elevated inspirations, remain for years, decades, or even a lifetime stuck, because they desire too much and discipline too little. They want to change everything but can't even change the first hour of their day. To Hill, discipline was not a moral virtue. It was a mechanism of power. He treated it as one of the purest expressions of human intelligence. Because the world doesn't reward what you dream, it rewards what you execute. And execution requires repetition, persistence, structure, iron will. Hill argued that true will is not that emotional surge sparked by a video or a book. True will is what you do when no one is watching, when you're tired, when you see no results, when you're being tested. That's where discipline reveals the true depth of desire. And that's where most people quit. Desire without discipline is like an arrow without a bow, like a boat without a rudder. It's loose energy, without direction, without propulsion. And Hill, with all his philosophical clarity, knew that thinking, visualizing, believing was not enough. It was necessary to turn that desire into practical, consistent routines that worked even on the bad days. Discipline, in this sense, is what converts the inner world into outer reality. It's what translates faith into movement. It's what proves to the universe and to yourself that you are ready to receive what you claim to want, because wanting without acting is lying. Hill emphasized that discipline is trainable. No one is born disciplined, but anyone can become disciplined. And it starts with mastery over small habits. Waking up at the promised time, completing what you wrote down the day before, saying no to what sabotages you, saying yes to what elevates you, eliminating distractions that drain focus, creating daily mental rituals, protecting your attention as if it were gold. Hill knew that mental discipline precedes physical discipline. The decision is made in the mind, and it's from the mind that the strength to repeat is drawn. That's why he talks so much about autosuggestion, visualization, and clear purpose. All of that exists to strengthen discipline, not replace it. And here lies a truth most people don't like to hear. The majority of people don't have what they want because they don't want it badly enough to pay the price. They desire success, but not discipline. They want freedom, but not routine. They dream big, but live small. Hill saw this as a devastating form of self-deception because the price of achievement is always paid in repeated effort, in emotional discipline, in sacrificing comfort, in consistent action. And that price, sooner or later, must be paid. The difference is that disciplined people pay up front and reap the rewards later. The undisciplined avoid paying now and suffer later. Time collects the bill from everyone. Hill also reminded us that discipline is not rigidity. It is strategic freedom, the kind of freedom born from conscious choice, coherent action, unshakable focus. It's discipline that allows creation, innovation, and powerful self-expression. Because it builds the inner space where inspiration can bloom without being crushed by inertia. Many see discipline as a cage. Hill saw it as structure. Structure for desire to grow, for will to blossom, for the mind to organize, because where there is no discipline, chaos reigns, and in chaos nothing grows. In chaos, even the noblest desire rots. And what is this iron will that Hill spoke of so often? It is the internal decision not to back down, even in the absence of visible results. It's the muscle of persistence. It's the fire that stays lit inside, even when life blows fierce winds. Will is what moves you when motivation fails, and it is built slowly, with small victories. Each habit honored, each goal respected, each distraction avoided strengthens that muscle, until one day you realize you no longer rely on willpower. You've become disciplined, and at that moment you become unstoppable. Hill knew this, and that's why he stated clearly, discipline is the price of greatness. There is no other way, there is no shortcut, there is no magic formula, just you, your mind, your body, and your daily choices. The question is not whether you have will. The question is your will disciplined enough to become reality? In a world where success is constantly marketed as a right, a privilege, or even a game of luck, Napoleon Hill brought a radically different and profoundly transformative perspective. Success is a moral duty, not a prize for a few, nor a whim of destiny, but an individual, non-transferable responsibility. For Hill, becoming successful wasn't an optional choice, it was a spiritual and ethical obligation of every human being who wishes to contribute to society, to their own growth, and to the balance of the world. And this idea, so simple and yet so revolutionary, has been ignored by generations that preferred to see success as vanity or personal luxury. But to Hill, success was service, it was mission, it was a calling. And what does that mean in practice? It means you have the duty to succeed, because by succeeding in an honest, useful, and productive way, you become a living example of what is possible. You become a source of inspiration, a link in a chain of transformation, someone who shows others that life doesn't have to be a burden, but a conscious construction. Hill argued that mediocrity is a waste of vital energy, that buried talent is a silent betrayal of the gift you were given. That stagnation is not neutrality, it is regression. Success, then, is not about ego, it is about legacy, about impact, about using what you have, your mind, your faith, your discipline, to leave the world a little more awake than you found it. This vision aligns with thinkers like Viktor Frankl, who saw fulfillment as the meaning of life, like Seneca, who viewed virtue as right action useful to the world, like Emerson, who said, "The purpose of life is not to be happy, but to be useful." Hill drank from the same fountain, the source of inner responsibility. And that means abandoning once and for all the victim role, the blame game, the endless comparisons. It means looking inward and asking, every single day, am I living up to what I could be? Because true failure, according to Hill, isn't trying and not succeeding. It's never trying. It's ignoring the potential pulsing within. It's letting life pass by without daring to leave a mark. Hill also understood that success, as a moral duty, demands self-mastery. Because you cannot contribute to the world while you are a slave to your emotions, addictions, distractions, or limiting beliefs. The first victory, then, is internal. It's the victory over yourself, over laziness disguised as caution, over fear dressed up as logic, over doubt disguised as humility. Hill said, "The mind that masters itself can master any circumstance." And that's more than a beautiful quote. It's a life directive, because the outer world is only a reflection of the inner mind, and if you can't build discipline within, you'll never create lasting impact without. Here's a crucial point. There is no real success without usefulness. Hill believed that wealth of any kind, whether financial, emotional, or intellectual, is only justified when it's connected to a purpose of contribution. Wealth for wealth's sake is just accumulation. Success without purpose is noise. But when you channel your achievements to serve, to educate, to heal, to inspire, or to liberate others, then success becomes sacred. It becomes part of the chain of human evolution. And that requires a constant question. How can I be useful with what I know? How can I serve with what I've built? Because it is in that place of service that ego dissolves and true fulfillment begins. Hill saw success as a mission because he understood that each person has a unique combination of experiences, talents, traumas, lessons, and desires. And that combination wasn't random. It is raw material for purpose. It's like a spiritual signature. Ignoring it is to waste your own existence. Living below your potential, according to Hill, is a form of injustice, both to yourself and to the world. That's why he insisted so often on terms like definite purpose, clear intention, persistent action, because he knew that without them, a person drifts, survives, but does not fulfill. And the greatest trap, in his view, is believing that success is a matter of luck or external opportunity. Hill believed that true success is built, brick by brick, from the personal decision to evolve continually. And that evolution is not a straight line. It's full of errors, of falls, of frustrations. But each obstacle overcome is a new layer of strength. Each challenge met is a new level of awareness. And the more you grow inside, the more the world responds on the outside. Not because it rewards you, but because it reflects you. Hill calls us then to a new kind of commitment. Not just to want to succeed, but to succeed for a reason greater than desire. To succeed because others need your example. To succeed because the world needs conscious leaders. To succeed because life, with everything it has given you, including your pain, is asking for a return. To succeed because not doing so would be to deny your own power of choice. The final question is simple, but urgent. What are you doing with the gift of being who you are? Because in the end, success isn't about status, it's about consciousness. And according to Hill, to be successful is to be useful, and to be useful is the highest form of honoring life. Among all the interpretations, summaries, reviews, and courses created around Think and Grow Rich, perhaps none has been as misguided, and yet so widespread, as the idea that the central goal of the book is to get rich. As ironic as it may sound, the title that became a symbol of material prosperity was actually a Trojan horse, carefully constructed by Napoleon Hill, to deliver to the reader something infinitely more valuable than money, the key to waking up from mental sleep. Because the book is not about accumulation, it's about awakening. It's not about bank accounts, it's about consciousness. It's not about numbers, it's about remembering who you are and what you are capable of building when you take command of your own mind. Hill used the language of wealth because he knew that's what caught people's attention. He understood the collective mind. He knew that the pain of financial scarcity was what made millions stop to listen. But once he had the reader in hand, he pulled back the curtain and delivered something much greater, a manual for reprogramming reality, a blueprint for engineering the human mind, a map for expanding individual consciousness. Each chapter, each concept, each exercise is, in truth, a camouflaged invitation to inner revolution. And few noticed, because they were too busy trying to manifest money to see the real gold passing before their eyes. The gold of autonomy, of clarity, of will, of presence. To Hill, getting rich was a metaphor. It meant rising. It meant overflowing. It meant accessing your creative power and using it consciously. And the first step toward that was to think. But to truly think, to think with depth, with intention, with courage, to think like someone who no longer accepts ready-made answers. To think like someone who questions what they were taught. To think like someone who doesn't just want to survive, but to live awake. And to think at that level is a revolutionary act, because most people simply react. Most people just repeat. Most live in a hypnotic state, programmed by trauma, by the media, by fear, by childhood voices, by social conventions. Hill wanted to break that trance. He wanted to provoke a mental insurrection. He wanted you to take possession of your thoughts the way a warrior takes possession of their sword, because only those who think freely live freely, and only those who live freely can truly become rich on all levels. Emotionally, spiritually, creatively, relationally, and finally financially, because money is only the final consequence of internal clarity. It's the external representation of what has already bloomed within. When you are aligned with your mission, in continuous action, with mental discipline and conscious faith, money comes, not as the goal, but as the reflection. And that's the inversion that changes everything. Money is not the objective. It is the result. The objective is awakening. Awakening to what? To the fact that you are, and always have been, the builder of your reality. To the fact that the mind is not a background character. It's the hidden protagonist of every outcome, every relationship, every crisis, every victory. Awakening to the power of focus, of decision, of auto-suggestion, of faith, of repetition, of persistence. Awakening to the truth that everything begins in your mind and ends in your world. Hill wanted you to see this so clearly that you could never unsee it once you did, because once you see it, there's no going back. And that awakening is not comfortable. It requires you to look at yourself without masks, to admit where you've failed yourself, to see where you've self-sabotaged, where you've outsourced responsibility, where you've blamed others for your lack of action. Hill didn't come to comfort you. He came to confront you. He came to call you to the battlefield that few dare to enter, the battlefield where the only enemy is your own mental pattern. And there you either win or you repeat your life. Day after day, year after year, decade after decade, until time charges you for what you could have been, but weren't. That's why the true reader of Hill doesn't finish the book wanting money. They finish wanting to wake up, wanting to think clearly, wanting to master their own mind, wanting to serve the world with their highest gifts, wanting to become the most elevated version of themselves, because at that point, wealth is inevitable. It's the shadow that follows those who walk toward the light of full consciousness. The final truth is simple, and that's what makes it so hard to accept. Think and Grow Rich was never a book about finances. It was a book about inner freedom. And that freedom is only available to those who dare to think beyond fear, beyond conditioning, beyond comfort. Now that you know this, the question is not whether you will get rich. The question is, will you wake up or keep dreaming about what you could already be living? After all this, you may have realized, Think and Grow Rich was never just a book. It was always a calling, a code disguised as a book, a secret summons for those ready to take on a new level of responsibility. Napoleon Hill didn't ask you to dream. He taught you how to think. He didn't promise you riches. He revealed tools. And what you do with them is now your choice. Because transformation doesn't happen when you understand. It happens when you decide to live as someone who understood. You've learned that desire without discipline is just fantasy, that faith isn't blind hope, but emotional repetition applied strategically, that the subconscious is not a mystery, it's a system, that auto-suggestion is the keyboard of your reality, that fear is the jailer of the soul, and that true enrichment begins with the awakening of consciousness. You've seen that the mastermind is more than a meeting, it's a fusion of purpose, that success is not ego, it's service, and that thinking, in the sense Hill used it, is a sacred revolutionary act, perhaps the most subversive act of all in a world that sleepwalks through life. So now it's no longer about having a plan, or reading more, or waiting for motivation. Now is the moment of decision. And the decision is simple, but profound. Will you keep replaying the same mental patterns that have kept you where you are? Or will you take the risk to evolve? Because yes, thinking clearly is a risk. Taking responsibility is a risk. Living awake in a world that remains hypnotized is a risk. But you know what's far more dangerous? Reaching the end of life, never having lived with intention, never having exercised the power to think freely, never having used your mind as the creative instrument of your own reality. Hill said, "Whatever the human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But most people conceive little, believe even less, and do nothing. You can't change what's already been, but you can right now write a new code, plant new ideas, train new thoughts, and repeat them until your mind bows and your world follows. Because in the end, the difference between those who achieve and those who merely dream is brutally simple. The achiever thinks with intention, programs with discipline, acts with consistency, and serves with purpose. The dreamer simply waits, and Hill did not write for those who wait. He wrote for those who wake up.